do this.
Yeah. I can see. So.
Hi everybody, sorry about the delay on this video. COVID slowed us down a little bit. Financially it's not the same as we were before. The videos are going to keep coming, but before, when we were aiming for 2 weeks at a time, we just can't keep up with that right now. But bear with us and you'll see them come out as and when. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be refurbing the axles and then chucking them back on so we have a rolling chassis.
Right guys, so as Lewis said, we are going to be refurbing the axles in this video. What we are going to do is we are going to undo the end of the hub, and we are going to take out the half shaft from this rear axle here, and we are going to try and determine how much sand got into the axle in the sandblasting process. We're hoping none, but if there is a lot of sand in there, we will have to do a more extensive strip of the axles. If there isn't any, we'll be replacing gaskets and bearings, sealing them back up, and then the axles will get a coat of Raptor, and then we'll bolt them back on. Okay guys, so we have got the hub and disc assembly off each end of this axle. Bearings are all in there, as you can see, so we're going to be replacing those. What I don't have right now are brake discs, which are quite an important component when putting this back together. But what we're going to do is we're going to take all the gaskets off here, clean everything up and sort of put things back together as best we can, until we hit a point where I don't have the right parts. The good news is the half shafts on both sides were in really good condition. The splines on them look mint, no sort of notching or wear on those, and everywhere where the bearings and the races sit is in pretty good nick, so happy with the condition of that. Right guys, so like the moron I am, I thought that the brake discs went on the outside of the hub, but they go on the inside, which causes a slight problem with putting it back together, as I don't have any brake discs. It's a bank holiday, nowhere's open, don't have them in stock. So what we're going to do is we're going to drain the old oil, or whatever's left of it, out of the diff now, and we're going to flush this differential to ensure that all of the sand that may have got in there, we haven't found much evidence of sand from taking the half shafts out, but we'll give it a flush, and then we'll put the half shafts back in so that everything's sitting in oil, nothing rusts, and then we will carry on with bolting everything back together once the discs turn up.
So we're just going to degrease these half shafts and then slide them back in so they're ready for when we come back with the brake pads, the brake discs, and we can start bolting everything back together.
Right guys, so what we've done there, bearing is in, very packed with grease. We also, in between the two races, there's a sort of gap. Just get some grease in there, grease up the face of the bearing races, but don't over grease it. Just, you know, give it a decent surface, and then make sure all of your bearings are well packed with grease, and then put the bearing in there and give it a turn, make sure it turns nicely. So now what we need to do is fit the seal. So the seal, this is a TD5, so it wants to sit on the shoulder inside here. There's a little lip which will correspond to a 4mm fitting depth. That's on the TD5 axle. I believe different Land Rover axles have different requirements. Some just fit flush, so do check that depending on what vehicle you have.
So what we're going to do, if you have a look at the seal, you've got one side with a kind of cavity and one side with a protrusion. We're going to take the old race and stick it over the side with the protrusion, and it's going to fit in that way round. And now you have to make sure that this goes in straight, otherwise we'll damage the seal. So you need to find a flat object, something strong that can sit, and then you can hammer it in straight down.
And for that we will be using a sledgehammer with the handle centered, and then we're just going to give it a ding and hope that it goes in straight. Okay guys, so that is now installed. As you can see in here, this is the 4mm you want to measure, and ours is pretty much bang on 4mm. We use the very accurate tool of a 4mm drill bit to measure the depth there. So we're just going to grease the inside of here now, and then we're going to put the brake disc back on, and then we're at the point where we need to fit it to the end of the axle. Right guys, sorry if you can't hear me over the rain. It is absolutely tipping it down, and the tent is quite noisy for that. So we've chucked the disc to hub bolts in here. Just struggled actually finding the torque setting, but we believe it's 55 pound-feet, which is about 75-ish Newton meters. So we're just going to tighten them up now. So for actually torquing it up, it's quite difficult to hold on to this, and obviously this is the rear of the disc that faces into the hub, so you can't even put it on to tighten it up. So grab yourself a wheel, put the studs through, and then you can use it to hold the whole assembly in place. So now in goes the front bearing there. Make sure it seats properly. So there we are, front bearings in there. Yes, we have used the old hubs. Whilst they look a bit gross compared to the nicely painted axle behind and the new bearings, they are just a big chunk of metal, so no need to replace them. Right guys, so we've just chucked in the external hub nut there. We've tightened it up to 30 Newton meters for now, and then dropped it onto the ground. It's a real struggle to actually find the right information on these. The Haynes manual's not particularly helpful, and the YouTube videos seem to have rather differing opinions, but we believe that on the TD5 axles you do not need to measure the end float due to the spacing of the bearings sort of within the hub. So you just have this single nut rather than two nuts, which you can use to tighten or loosen and adjust the end float. So we think we've got it right, and this we should essentially just tighten up to 220 Newton meters. When it was up in the air, it's only tightened to 30. There is absolutely no movement in that direction. There's no end float, so it seems as though it's right. But yeah, it's a bit of a minefield finding the information for the TD5 and TDCI hub assembly.
So to get these trailing arm bushes out, we've had to give it a bit of a heat treatment and burn some of the rubber, get it a little bit softer, and then put it through the press. It's quite a long long bush, so we were finding that the press was struggling the deeper you got in there, so just loosening it up with heating the rubber seems to do the trick. One last push and this will be out.
Right guys, so here we are. These are the front radius arms and we are just taking out the old bushes. As you can see here, the new bush is in, or almost all the way in. We've shown you how to deal with these, but on filming, on reviewing the footage, discovered the audio was terrible. So what we're doing is we've pushed the middle of the bush out. That's easy enough with a press and a socket. The rubber just sort of splits away. And then grab yourself a hacksaw, if you've got a reciprocating saw or even a jigsaw, that would be better, the hand tool, but yeah, cut a couple of slits there and then grab your new bush, and we're using a socket that very nicely fits pretty much perfectly on here. It's a 32mm I believe on the front, lining it all up on the press and then just pushing it, and as the new bush goes in, that sort of external race sleeve, whatever it is, comes out like that. Front radius arm, new bushes, and there are the old braces there. With the back, you will have noticed we actually cut all the way through, but our hacksaw's shot, and the blade isn't cutting properly because it's covered in the sort of rubber seal that was left. So whilst we thought to a degree we were through, we actually weren't, but with a press and some force it will get it out. Alright guys, so we're starting to put the suspension components back together now, which is the fun part, starting to reassemble. So these are the shock top links, and we're just going to sort of build up. The reason that we're doing it in a slightly haphazard order is we've just got parts everywhere. Nuts, bolts, washers, and all we have is the part number, so we're having to sort of methodically go through the part numbers to work out where each thing goes, which will take some time, but it's starting to get exciting, and yeah, we'll start building up.
So these top mounts to the chassis, we couldn't find in the book the torque setting, but a quick Google said 44 Newton meters. That's what we're going with.
So we've got the shock top mounts on, nice new mounts, nice new hardware, and now we are going to put together the A-frame, the rear A-frame, and get it sort of dangling in place before putting the axle underneath.
So guys, we've picked up the rear end with the engine hoist, and then if you can hear we're out of breath, that's because we've just carried the rear axle round and got it on these little axle stands in position, waiting for us to start bolting things together. Right, really sorry about this, our camera ran out of battery. What we've done, whilst we didn't know that was going on, is a little bit of jiggling here and there to line up the axle. We used a jack just to twist the diff around so we could get everything lined up, and these are now sitting in loosely, ready for us to torque them up, both sides. Right, so we've just torqued up the two ginormous bolts, one connecting to the axle here, 176 Newton meters, and also through into the chassis down here. That's a 30mm nut, and that was also 176 Newton meters. So we've done that on both sides, and we are
Ready for some fun suspension parts like some shocks and springs.
exactly, nice yellow bits.
Yeah.
Right, so you would have seen us tightening and untightening these couple of bolts down here, because the bar comes straight. The bolts aren't long enough to get the washers and nuts all on at the same time, and they can't be any longer because otherwise it hits the axle there. So what we've done is just with a nut and a bolt tightened it up so that we've bent the bar, and then undid everything and put on the the flat washer and the spring washer and the nut and tighten it back up again. Things for you guys. These 3 on the top, so A-frame to chassis, are all 63 Newton meters. These, which bolt the A-frame together, these long bolts that go through here, they're 115 Newton meters. These ones down here, the big ones that bolt the A-frame to the mounting brackets, they are 150 Newton meters if you're using an M16. I think it's 176 if you're using the Imperial type. And this ball joint nut here is also 176 Newton meters.
So you will have just seen us sort of drilling and whacking this off. So on each side of the bracket here, spot welded to the axle, are these shock cups, and they fit the standard Land Rover suspension fine. But for, I think, all aftermarket stuff from looking at videos online, you want to be using the cups or sort of pressed washers that come with it, and as you can see, that hole there is a lot smaller than that hole there, so that'll sit on there, and
then the bush,
and yeah, with the bush. So we were concerned, we were thinking about slightly bodging it and just ditching one of these washers, but actually because that hole's so large, it would have been moving around in there, which is no good. So a lot of people online say that you can just cold chisel these off. Maybe their chassis, their axles were in worse condition than this one was, but we certainly couldn't just whack it off in one go. So we've drilled the 4 spot welds on the top one, which was there, and then similarly on the bottom there is another cup that sits under there. Bit of a pain getting underneath. Wish we'd known about this when we were working on the axles and they were completely off the vehicle, but it's only on the rear, so we'll get the other side done, give this a lick of paint, and then we can fit the shock as designed. Now we've done that modification down the bottom, we can put this on. It's got bush on each side there and a washer on each side, goes like that. And it's best to do the top first so that you're not fighting with the angle, because obviously it's fitting on something straight. Give that a couple of turns, and then you have the larger hold washers at the top so that they can fit over this, and they go like that. I think they go like that. Oh no, maybe like that. And then compress it. Get it lined up. Yeah, that looks right. Let it out. And then grab a washer, bush, things like that. And again, what would be really good is if Britpart could just provide some instructions with their kits. Save everyone a lot of time. Alright guys, so that's basically how it sits. So you've got washer, bush, washer. This washer sits against the bracket there, and then similarly underneath, washer, bush, washer, and then we'll tighten that off and it should all seat nicely. Right guys, just for your ease as well, because it can be a bit of a pain to find torque settings. So this top nut here, just torque that up to 55 pound-foot, and the bottom one is 28 pound-foot. You will need 2 people because one of you needs to grab hold of this to stop it twisting. I think the torque settings Lewis gave earlier were metric, but I don't understand any of that. So pound foot on the back here. Yeah, it's coming along nice. All right, just letting the weight off now. See if it sits a bit.
That's it. Weight's off.
Awesome. So there we go. Bumblebee effect on the rear. But really nice to start bolting on new parts instead of just fighting rust and old nuts, bolts and things like that. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay guys, so you will have just seen us putting the suspension on, well the front suspension on. We have got new towers, new shocks, new springs, new bottom spring plates there, and all the associated hardware. Now we have run into a little bit of an issue here. As you can see there is a bolt loosely through the front of the radius arm. I only put a bolt in there because we wanted to be able to pivot the radius arm up so that we could get it into the chassis as we brought the chassis down onto the axle. Now here you can see this bush, great big bush here, and it's pushed in as far as I can get it just by hand in its current position. There is supposed to be a washer and a nut on the end of here. As you can see, there is no way I could even get a nut on, let alone with a washer in situ. Now at the front here, as you can also see, the radius arm is sitting below the axle, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is that there should be a great big TD5 engine sitting in there that's very heavy, compressing these springs down, which would bring everything in line. We're not in a position to put the engine back in, and we certainly don't want to put it in just to compress the springs enough to be able to bolt that up. Also, this is a 2-inch lift kit. Those are stock Land Rover radius arms. Now I know there's an argument that those two shouldn't be used together, but we're going to have a go and we're hopefully going to get away with it. If we run into any issues, we will look in the future to change the radius arms for some that are more suited to a lift kit, but for now this is what we're doing. So I've had an idea, and this is what we're going to try and do. We're going to get some ratchet straps over the axle on each side and over the chassis and pull the axle up to the chassis, essentially compressing these springs, which will hopefully bring the axle up and that radius arm back into the right location there, and then we can get the nut on and torque things up, which will help bring everything into its right location. Right, here we go guys, so we're just putting the final bolt into the radius arms there. We've got it all lined up. What we were doing wrong was we were just trying to compress the springs, thinking that would bring everything together, but actually the issue was the axle's angle. So it needed twisting to sort of bring it round. So we used the ratchet strap to pull the diff up in line, and then everything went through. So that may cause us an issue further down the line. We'll have to see with the compression when the engine's in and how everything lines up. But yeah, it may be that angle's just too far out, but we can always put a wide angle prop on.
that's it for today. We're going to leave it there. We're really happy to see her back on the wheels. So in our next set of videos, we're going to try and do is start having a look at the engine. We know that we want to generally overhaul it, but as we take it apart, we'll see how far that needs to go.
So we're really sorry that it's taken us so long to get this video out. It's been months and months, but obviously with the world the way it is at the moment, it's been really difficult, not only financially, but also to be able to find the time where we're allowed to do these things together. So as I say, we're sorry it's taken so long. We are going to sort of look at what we can do in the future, possibly more frequent, shorter videos, so that we keep bringing out the content. But thanks for sticking with us, guys. I hope you're all staying safe and well. And until the next one, take care.